So, if we like to say Mars Hill in Greek, it's Areopagus. Areopagus and Mars Hill is the same thing. Is this rock here? Areopagus in Greek, Mars Hill in English. Yeah, the same rock, which is here behind. This place became very important for the Athenian society with the abolishment of monarchy. When the authority passed from the hands of the king to the hands of the royal council, which became now the supreme authority of Athens, the Supreme Council of Athens, it was not necessary for them to have their meetings at the area of the palace, at the top of the Acropolis. But they started having their meetings at the top of this rock here, close to the Acropolis, shorter, more convenient, close to the Agora. And since then, this Supreme Council of Athens was called Supreme Council of Mars Hill. Today, keeping the tradition, Greeks call the Supreme Court of the country Mars Hill Supreme Court. Today. The place became even more important for the Athenian society when an Athenian lawmaker of 7th century BC called Dracon, possibly you have heard the draconian law, made homicide from a personal and a family case into a social and a religious case. Remember, until that time, if somebody was killed and had not people to revenge for his death, he was buried and forgotten. No investigations to try to find the author of the crime, nothing. In the case now the person had family or friends to revenge, then we have the beginning of a chain of crimes, of killings, which could last several generations and many, many years. So remember the Old Testament, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. Yeah. Dragon said that we have to stop this barbaric custom. And everyone who for every reason kills somebody, pours out on the ground human blood, has to get proceeded in front of the Supreme Council of the city. And that is going to be the only responsible to decide about his life. And for the first time in history, we have cases investigated by the Supreme Council of Athens, recognizing justifications to the author, to an author of such a crime, and spare his life, legally. No, this person, although his life was spared legally, was not allowed to enter in the human society. And here we have the religious part of it. Everybody who poured human blood on the earth was unclean. Even the soldiers coming back from the battlefield victorious, they couldn't enter to the city unless first we are purified outside of the city, and then they could enter to celebrate their victory in the city. And so the Supreme Court now had to find and to point the way of the purification of the person whose the life was spared. And that was also his punishment. And this is how the homicide became social and religious case. And we have the justice working practically in Athens for the first time in the Western history. Because of this process, this rock got a certain shape. Athenians built a retaining wall all around the rock, like the wall you see at the Acropolis. The rock at the top is very rough, so they put debris and they made the place level at the top, and on the side where you see this wooden plateau being erected now, they built a temple, a small temple like the temple of Nike we are going to see a little bit later at the Acropolis. This temple was dedicated to goddesses called Furies. the Furies were very ugly and terrible goddesses of the earth who came up to make the conscience of a criminal to feel guilty. In the case that justice was satisfied, these Furies became favorites for the person, and they helped him to be reincorporated in the society. So, chiseled on the bedrock, this staircase you see here, 7th century before Christ. This staircase, since 7th century before Christ until 2004, was the only access to the top. At 2004 was added the modern staircase. And at the rest of the summit, which was made flat, they built a marble theatrical structure for the Athenians to sit around. In the middle where in a theater we have the orchestra, they built two small bimas, one for the accuser or the accusers and the other for the accused. And here in the theater we have the stage, they put the desk of the judges, and so was used as a court displays. Because the Athenian society was always very small, this place was not used often by the Supreme Court to judge murderers, and was open to the public. Because of this marble structure, the place became very popular to the philosophers. They could sit in groups, one opposite the other, and they could develop their debates. And this is the reason why, in the middle of 1st century AD, when the stranger Apostle Paul arrived here, and he met the philosophers at the Agora, two groups which had problem with not the preaching of a new God called Christ, but of the concept of resurrection. Athens at that time had many philosophical groups and schools, but two had problem with the resurrection. Who these groups were? The Stoics and the Epicureans. Remember, yesterday we mentioned the Stoics when we passed by Megara. I told you that the founder of the Stoics, had as a personal tutor a Socrates disciple. The Stoics believe that the most important part of the human is not what we see, but what we don't see. The immortal soul, which is relative of divinity. What we see is the temporary residence of the soul, which was the great gift, the most precious gift of the gods to the humans. But because the humans became sinners, this residence was turned into a prison for them. And so was introduced in their life the pain, the struggle, perishability, and death. So their suggestion as a school was, let's suffer our punishment with patience, without complaints, stoically, with stoicism, until gods become merciful on us to set us free from our prison. And they celebrate it as the most joyful day of somebody, not his birthday, but his death day. So, speaking to these people about resurrection, it was like telling to them, go back to your prison. So they had objections. The others were the Epicureans. The Epicureans were a school which was founded after the teaching of a certain teacher, Athenian teacher called Epicurus, 4th century BC, who is registered as the first materialist teacher. According to him, all about gods, spirits, Hades are all nonsense. Nonsense born in the human brain, and they die with it. So their suggestion was, eat, drink, have pleasure, because tomorrow you die. And here we have the roots and the basis of the hedonistic view of the life. As you understand, there is not room for resurrection to this kind of approach. And although these two groups were totally opponent, fighting every day in the squares of Athens, in the Stoas, and here on Mars Hill, they had as a common ground the denial of the resurrection. Now, Apostle Paul came here and he was challenged to speak about Christ to people who ignore not only Christ, but also the Old Testament and its prophecy. And they didn't like to learn about it. And at the same time, these people were considered to be the supreme intelligence of all the Mediterranean world. And he was well prepared for that. Apostle Paul based his speech on Mars Hill to a very important philosophical, not religious, but philosophical concept, the concept of the unknown God. Now, here, for us to understand how important is this concept for the philosophers of that time, we have to go back to 6th century BC between the cities Ephesus and Miletus in Asia Minor. At that time, we have there thinkers who had decided that myth is not enough to give a right interpretation for nature. They saw nature, they were overwhelmed with nature, and they decided to find the third origin.